What's going on, everybody? It's FREEDO and Liam, or Weagle, here today for Your Overwatch, and we're going to be discussing Orisa, the new character. We put a lot of time into researching her on the PTR, figuring out her playstyle, and come up with some thoughts about where she's going to fit into the game. Now, I will say, something that I think is the most important thing to mention is that this hero release has been a bit different than the last two, and word on the street is, and we think, that likely Doomfist may be coming in the short term to sort of balance out this hero, because there was the animated short, which wasn't a full cinematic, that talked about Doomfist. Everything's been leading towards Doomfist, and she's been brought into the Overwatch game to fight Doomfist, so I kind of think Doomfist is coming. And if that's the case, and he enters the game, it could pretty much throw a wrench in everything that we're talking about here today.
I think for me, I feel like Doomfist might still be coming because it was so teased at for so long. We had the stuff with Terry Crews and everyone knows there's hype for it. But not only that, the short that came out only simply mentioned his name. Doomfist attacked the airport, for example, but there was pictures of it, and it's obvious he's going to be coming around as a hero, as a villain, or whatever you want to call him, but he's going to be in the game at some point, and it feels like there's a short missing here. It feels like they've not done an animated short because it's just around the corner. Now, this is speculation, but a lot of people think it, and they said he's not the 24th hero, but that doesn't stop him being the 25th, so hopefully we'll hear some more about that soon. It may be very interesting if they do bring two new heroes out close together, but I think it'd be cool to have a new DPS in the game. Let us know what you guys think to that. We're going to move on with Orisa.
For the past few days, me and Liam were testing Orisa on the PTR. I played her mostly, and we've kind of been trying to theory craft how to work around her, what she's good at, what she's not good at, and overall, I will say, from the player who's played her the most, that she feels mechanically fun to play, as in the flow of what she's able to do in the battlefield feels good to me, or she's like a rewarding hero to play, but I don't know where we feel about her viability and if she even does anything better than another tank, because she's kind of specific in what she's able to do.
So I think comparing her to Sombra is kind of important here, because Sombra, for a long time, fit a role that wasn't needed within the game. Now, with Bastion being changed and this new hero out, Sombra's seeing more and more use, but up until this point, it's been hard to find that specific role for Sombra within the team comps that people were used to playing or happy to play. And I feel that Orisa could be in a similar place. She has a really cool kit, it's fun to use, and she has a really unique ability, which is Fortify. The thing about this ability is, even though it seems super strong on the face of things, it's not for her team, it's just for her. It can block some stuff, but if you use Fortify and get hammered down, it still hammers the rest of your team down anyway. It only protects her. It's really a glorified Wraith form, I would say, by Reaper. I mean, she can still shoot, but it's kind of just avoid a few abilities for her specifically. That isn't to say it doesn't have its uses, because it does, but it isn't such a team-focused ability for her, and I'm not sure even her right-click is either. So she kind of fits this weird support tank role and not the main tank role that I don't know if they aim for her to be, but they talk about her being an anchor tank, but she simply doesn't have the sustainability or the health pool to be that hero, so I think she fits somewhere nearer a support tank.
Now, a big issue that I think Blizzard is coming across is trying to find a hero that isn't Rein that can play like Rein. And that's what I think they're trying to do with Orisa. And depending on what direction they want to go, they could buffer in one way, or a few ways possibly, in order to really fulfill what she does to fit that position. So we could go ability by ability in this to sort of break down what the issues that we have noticed with the character are. Now, partially of this is our fault, because we titled the video called Everything Fortify Counters, but we use the term counter oftentimes as shorthand that everyone understands, but really, in Overwatch, it gets overused because counter means something very specific, and it doesn't actually counter things in that it doesn't make something that the enemy is trying to do to you weak or remove it entirely, like Liam was saying. So it counters it for her, which is a very specific type of thing, because if Mei is freezing your whole team with an ult, and you get out of it, you still probably lose the team fight anyway, whereas a counter is more like a Genji Reflect, where they throw something at you like a grav, you reflect it, the enemy team gets grabbed, and you win the fight for free. That's like a straight up counter. I think in fighting games, the term counter is used that way too. There's a difference between a parry, which avoids an ability, and a counter that actually turns it on its head. I would say like she counters, quote unquote, like Rein pin. Rein tries to pin her, she can fortify, and then he gets screwed basically, where he gets stuck against her and it doesn't get any value from the pin, his shield's down, and that whole play is wasted. But a lot of the things she just can withstand. Now, it'll be interesting to see if that ability could somehow be used to protect her team in the same way that like Rein's barrier protects the team, because Rein barrier isn't just for him, of course, it protects everyone else. Whereas Fortify, more or less, like Liam said, is a self ability, which really isn't that great for a tank because
the tank's role is basically to protect the team, right? And the same issue with her shield too. Now, something Eddie wanted me to say for this video is if she was an anchor tank, what she would be able to do is take positioning, probably with Lucio's speed boost, but your team would take positioning, you would drop her barrier and use that position to kill the enemy team. But that isn't actually what she can do right now. Because her barrier doesn't cover enough, it's so easy for someone to just shoot you from above or from the side, and since it's down and you've got it there for 10 seconds, that ability just isn't good enough for a main tank. Now, I think where it is good, particularly on defense, but offense too, is where you couple her with a Rein. She's simply not going to replace Rein, I think it is the short of it, is what we're saying. I think she's going to be played with him because she doesn't do the tanking well enough. Now, you got to think even in terms of keeping herself alive. So if Roadhog, for example, is in some trouble and someone gets close, he has an insta-kill. He can hook and kill someone. If someone gets close to a Rein, he can swing or pin them or put his shield up. Now, if someone gets close to a Zarya, she can clutch bubble and charge herself in order to defend herself. This new tank, Orisa, doesn't have that ability. Now, Winston and D.Va are different because they dive around and stuff, but not only is her ability to actually defend her team that good, she also can't defend herself that well either. Fortify, yes, can stop against a few things, but the 50% armor boost, for example, doesn't really do a lot because she's so easy to hit anyway that she's going to be taking damage all the time. So the clutch ability, yes, it's there to stop a Reinhardt pin and stuff, but in terms of her actually being tankier when it's used, it doesn't really serve that purpose, and it's actually quite difficult for her to keep herself alive as a main tank.
And this is very crucial, I think, and the resistance she gets from Fortify is a bit misunderstood, I think, because compared to the other tanks that are on the ground, Reinhardt, Roadhog, and Zarya that we have right now, we know how they all play. If, say, Reinhardt's in a pinch, he has that big shield that he can aim wherever he wants, where he takes no damage, mind you, if he's able to block with it. Whereas Fortify effectively only gives her a few hundred extra hit points. Even if you can say it doubles her hit point pool, she only has 400. Roadhog has 600. In comparison, and he's lethal at some range too, whereas Orisa, because her weapon is so moderate in its scalability and its burst damage, players know very quickly the footsie battle that they have with Orisa, where if she fortifies, you more or less can just ignore her if you wanted to, because it's pretty difficult for her to kill you. Whereas Zarya, when she gets into a duel, there's a much more interesting exchange there where she pops her bubble. It's a whole bunch of extra HP. I would argue even almost effectively more than Fortify could block, because one Zarya bubble can block infinite damage from one source, whereas Fortify, it's a little bit more messy how that works because it takes a percentage off, but nevertheless, there's a benefit to the Zarya to take damage in that case. So the enemy has to decide, do we break this bubble, do we ignore it and take free damage from the Zarya? Whereas all the while, when Zarya is getting charged, she becomes more and more lethal and scary. Orisa doesn't really have that aspect to her, and because of that, she's very easy to play around. And she can't really be the center of attention, otherwise she kind of gets wrecked, which is why I think I'm leaning towards liking the idea of maybe Fortify either having an effect that can apply to more than just her, so it's more of a supportive thing, or if it can somehow swing a fight in her favor in the same way that like Zarya or landing a Roadhog hook does when they're in those medium range tank battles. Because right now, it just sort of is a way for her to stay alive, but there's way better ways to do that in the game currently. And especially when we talk about counters, right? Because if you're trying to counter a specific type of ability, Zarya bubbles are already amazing for that. Because say if you have a Roadhog on the enemy team who keeps hooking your team, and you're able to pop bubbles on that character, not only do you stop the Roadhog hook, but if they shoot the bubbles, Zarya gets charged, right? So you gain a benefit by their playstyle, and Orisa doesn't really have that at the moment.
Now, one thing I definitely don't want to do is write her off. She's definitely going to have uses, and I don't think she's in that place where Sombra was, where she released. I just don't think her role is as a main tank, and I think it's going to be more supporting. Now, what's her right-click ability called? That one is very, very interesting. It drags people kind of where you want within a certain radius. Now, it can be easy to throw your teammates off, but it also can have some massively good uses. Now, one of the overrated uses right now is taking people off the map with it. Of course, that's good. It can be used for that, but I don't think that will be the consistent use for it. However, setting up certain ultimates, moving people from high ground, stuff like that, I think it's going to see very good use when you get used to using it. Now, one attempt I saw on our team the other day, and it didn't work, but it can work, and I've seen it, is you would drag the enemy death ball up into the air so that you can earth shatter their whole team, because the barrier won't work as you're up in the air, whereas when you come down, the earth shatter will. Like, it's a very time-based thing. It's not easy to do, but it has massive utility since you get it all the time, and it's not an ultimate. It's almost like a mini graviton in a certain way. Now, someone like a Tracer in the fight that FREEDO said to me earlier, you could use this ability to crowd control her just for a second. She has such a low health pool that you'd be able to kill her very quickly. So I think there's some very, very good uses for that ability, and it puts her more in the support tank role rather than the main tank one.
And I think that's the interesting thing to me right now, because Halt is what it's called, her alt fire, was the most impressive ability from her for me. And I think from a design standpoint, the other things she's supposed to be able to do, I think, should have been more core to her role, which is why I think most of that is probably going to get changed, or at least a few of those abilities might get buffed. But the nice thing about Halt is that it's a very easy type of crowd control to hit, because it can pass through things, because it can pass through barriers, right? So you can get it where you need it to go. But one problem that I came across is that if, say, you're trying to crowd control a death ball with a bastion in it, it actually pulls up the bastion, and it's the one crowd control ability that can do that. So one issue that you might find is that you can easily crowd control, but you crowd control so much that you pull the Bastion and Rein and the whole kit and caboodle together where they wanted to be anyway. So you can put them somewhere else, pull them off the high ground, which is incredibly strong, but you can't really as easily disperse them because it's a pull ability, not a push. Whereas like a concussion blast boosts the Rein off and maybe the healer or something, and then Bastion's left on a spot by himself. That's really strong and immediately easy to follow up on. Whereas her Halt ability can pull them off the high ground, but it will bring them all together, which if they have a Rein shield in that, as you know with Graviton, if you have a Rein inside of Graviton, it can make it really hard to follow up on that Graviton. In the same way, Halt works like that. Now against Tracers and stuff, I think this is really interesting because typically when people talk about dive comps and countering them, it's difficult to suggest an easy counter because you have to hit McCree stuns and Roadhog hooks to really hard counter a dive comp. And if you're not hitting those skill shots, it can be very difficult to overcome it without simply just out-aiming your enemy. Whereas her Halt ability can zone out a fight, so you can like shoot it through an arena of the battlefield, and when Tracer and Genji and Winston are zipping around your healers and stuff, you can pull them towards that to be able to hold them down for a second, even to set up for a hook or a stun. It could be good to combo in that way. So I would like to see her tankiness rival her ability to crowd control with Halt, because right now for me that's her strongest ability. Because I think part of the reason why her tankiness isn't very good is because where she puts her shield is at such a shallow location. I mean, Eddie said this to me earlier, that it's as if you have a bulletproof credit card that you're trying to hide behind. We can't take any damage through this little space. And even herself, because she's such a big, clunky hitbox, if you try to get behind your barrier, it's pretty easy to walk through it because it's got this really weird curve to it. Whereas Rein's shield and Winston's bubble are very obvious where the you're in it, you're out of it parameters are. It's very easy to see and clear, and they're a lot larger of a scale. Orisa's barrier doesn't really work like that, and though it could be sick if you put it down at a choke or maybe in a doorway or something like that, but quickly you can find that the mobility characters can just get around it so easily that it's hard for it to really sustain a fight. And maybe she's not supposed to, because I think very quickly, if they push her in the wrong way, it could become overpowered as well, because we simply don't want it to be better than Rein's shield, of course, but I think it needs to somehow maybe compete with that if her Halt ability is too much just for her. I think somewhere around there in the tankiness department, she has to increase, because her hitbox, guys, I gotta tell you, it's like she's a Torbjorn or a Zenyatta. It's large and easy to hit. Hanzo feels like a direct counter to her. Because she moves so slow when shooting, I think most players can hit Hanzo arrows into her head. That's how easy of a shot she is to hit, so it almost doesn't matter that she has this 50% resistance ability. She's so easy to pellet damage to from an alternate angle, either above or behind or whatever.
One thing I wanted to say, that the Halt ability, moving bastions, is actually a bug. Now, I don't know how true that is because it's not been confirmed on either side, but nothing else really moves Bastion just while in his turret. So apparently that might be changed. I don't know, no confirmation. We'll see when they drop the hero. As we say, I think they will rework some of the numbers and stuff with the abilities anyway. Either give her more armor, slightly more damage. Fortify might do something slightly different. I think what we've got is cool, and I think she can be worked into team comps. And I don't think she's massively underwhelming. It's just she isn't going to be any kind of a replacement tank for Rein, and I think that Rein's just going to be meta forever for a lot of defensive comps especially. And the one thing that I hope doesn't happen, and I have seen this on the PTR and I hope it doesn't happen when everything gets released, is some kind of barrier meta, because we played teams that were running Reinhardt, Orisa, Symmetra, and there were barriers everywhere, and it was really not fun. So I'm hoping that doesn't become a thing. We'll just have to see what's going on with that when it drops.
I mostly agree with what Liam said there. I think the only thing that I would change is that one slight buff in any direction, these little changes that they make have massive impact. So for instance, if Halt doesn't pull Bastion along with the rest of her team, it becomes way better all of a sudden, because it can split those targets very easily and almost like hard counter that in a way, because it's so easy to get Halt through the barrier and team, whereas Pharah has to poke her head out above the team comp to get a flank. That's a much harder play to make, whereas Orisa can just shoot it past them and pull them where she wants. So every direction that they might go with her can easily push her into having a very strong playstyle one way or another, whether that's Fortify somehow helping her team more than just her, whether it applies to them or it creates a sort of arrowhead in front of her to be able to protect people around her. If her barrier gets a bit bigger or the cooldown changes, a lot of these other things could really start to make her an imposing force on the battlefield, whereas right now she seems a little bit difficult to leverage and hard to justify over the current tanks we already have, but a fun character nonetheless. Alright guys, well that's it for today's discussion, an entry point into digging into this new character. What do you guys think? There's a lot of discussion to be had, so let us know in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. It really does help us out. Subscribe for more because we upload each and every day, so you're going to want to hit the bell icon so you join the notification squad. Linked in the description, you can check out our Twitter, our Twitch page, and our Discord server where you can find the Orisa main of your dreams. It's been Liam and FREEDO for Your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.
I can't believe you took my line. That's my line. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah, no, it's a great line. I've been stealing it.